exit this building to Caesar Chavez Park. For restroom and the drinking fountain, if you go out of this auditorium, take a left turn past the green chandelier, take a left turn again, and not again, just one time. And it's on your right-hand side. So without further ado, I think we should start.
So good morning, everyone. We are hoping that today's meeting will be, I'm Tony Brazil. I am the branch chief of the Transportation and Clean Technologies branch. So today we try to get everyone together to talk about transportation electrification. The utilities and PUC will be making some decisions, I think, in the coming months and early next year on what the future for transportation electrification might look like. So today, again, those of you who are at the edges of the room and are likely to be making comments, there are some open chairs here at the round table or the square table. So I do invite you to come forward. If you do make a lot of comments, we'll invite you at that time to come forward. So we do have some presentations, but again, the idea of today's meeting is to go through each area or item to kind of get a better sense of what fleet's perspectives are, what utilities' perspectives are, the PUC and the various agencies. So I'll kind of give you just a brief overview on ARB's role and kind of where we are in a little bit of a recap of a prior meeting that we had in April on the same issues. One of the things that's changed since the April period is that ARB is now formally pursuing strategies to support and to potentially regulate the market for zero-emission trucks. And so there's, I think, a little bit broader audience now with that represent the heavy-duty space, including fleets as well as transits. We've been working with transit fleets for some time. So with that, do remember that because we are webcasting, that we would like you to identify your name and affiliation when you speak and to use the microphone so that those on the phone can hear. Amy will be speaking after I will via phone, so from the PUC, so that I would like her to be able to be involved in the discussion as well as other parties that are involved. Okay, go ahead and start with the presentation. Oh, I get the clicker. Okay, so the reason we're looking at transportation electrification is multifold. From the Air Quality Agency's perspective, we're looking at emission reductions. SB 350 called out strategies that look at emission reductions, climate, and other. We're also looking at criteria pollutants, and when we do look at that, we look at different strategies on reducing emissions, motor vehicles being one of the largest categories at the local level, regional level, and overall climate protection goals. Transportation electrification crosses many areas. I think this makes this a very interesting topic. Flexible use of renewable energy, it can help stabilize the grid. It could ultimately add more demand to the grid, so there's a balance on how to do that in the right way. And then electric vehicles, where they're suitable, are much more efficient than combustion technologies at this point, and I expect them to continue to do so. So when we're looking at long-term GHG reduction strategies, the best use of fuels is always going to be a priority that we're looking at. So this slide here is just to kind of give you an overview. There's a number of elements associated with SB 350. Broadly, as you understand, I'm sure many of you know, it's the purpose of the SB 350 is to promote a widespread transportation electrification in all areas of the state. ARB specifically tasked with getting a better understanding of the barriers and opportunities associated with clean transportation and access for low-income owners. We're specifically involved with and directly coordinating with its CEC and PUC on modeling and trying to project what the future impact may be on emissions as well as the grid itself. But today's discussion is going to be focused on fleet deployments. The staff that are here from ARB are from the regulatory side of the equation, so we're looking at finding ways to move forward to accelerate these markets transportation electrification efforts that the utilities and are a key part of that. And what we can do regulatorily and with incentives is ultimately codependent on how things proceed. So again, our focus will be from the regulatory staff looking at specific strategies to either have manufacturers or fleets adopt and include zero emission technologies in their fleets. So this is just a brief recap. I'm not going to go over the slide in great detail, but on April 8th, we had a meeting here where we did have, it was a broad representation, clearly a lot more transit fleets than some of the other truck fleets, although there were some represented. The purpose of that meeting and this one is to simply have an open dialogue and clear communication as the utilities formulate what their interpretation of the actions that they might take to remove barriers. We want to make sure that the fleets have an opportunity to voice their concerns, make sure that something's not being missed, to the extent that we can, is get a sense of what is being considered in terms of what that might be included. And so I'll have some questions, some others. So on April 29th, the PUC had its workshop. ARB did participate in that, and I think Amy will go over some of that after me here. So, and then part of this, I mean, today's discussion is to simply share information, but to the extent that people have the right information, this is an evolving process. I know that even within different organizations, how you approach it, who even communicate with is something yet to be discussed, and I'm hoping that kind of comes out as to, I understand the utilities have been working with individual fleets on deploying some infrastructure and other things, and looking at their overall plans and interconnecting to the utilities, and I think some of the issues there will probably come up. We do foresee that continuing a coordination meeting of this nature would be something that would continue for some time, because we do anticipate even a year or two from now that there are probably going to be value and opportunities to continue these discussions. So this is just a recap on some of the issues that we did learn about from the fleets and that we did present, so that we thought reflected the interests at the time based on our initial April meeting. So a lot of those were bus related. But so zero emission bus deployment strategies are ultimately dependent on costs, and I think that's going to be something that's obviously true for private trucking fleets. It's you're going to make your business decisions based on what the situation is now and what you expect it to be in the future, or the life of the vehicles that you might be purchasing. Temporary rates were very helpful for the transit fleets, in particular for on-route charging during the day. Temporary rates allowed for a small number of buses to be deployed for transit to get the experience without the higher costs associated with charging a very small number of vehicles during the day based on how existing utility rates work. Existing rates have a 5-minute interval potential that could establish when the demand charges are charged, and so we believe that some of the discussion there was providing more certainty as to whether you're going to be potentially your demand charges would be based on a 5 or 15-minute interval. If that was more clear, then it would remove some uncertainty as to what you might end up paying for your electricity over time. And then that broadly, that the transits and I think other fleets are interested in having some predictability as to what the future might look like. Not absolute guarantees or certainty, but just like when you plan forward, you kind of forecast what you expect to see. And so to the extent that that could be more evident as to what the future might look like, the easier it will be for people to make decisions going forward. Okay. We also made some comments on third-party storage. I suspect there'll be some parties here that might be interested in that angle. We think that there's potential opportunities there if the fleet owner controls a third-party storage system. They're going to design it for rates, and so to the extent that the rate design encourages certain behaviors that could be addressed that way. But if the utility were to own and operate the third-party storage or the storage themselves, they would then also have the potential opportunity or benefit of being able to on real time manage the charging and discharging of that storage system to meet their grid stability needs. And so to the extent that there's opportunities there, that was one of the items we pointed out. Potential for utility ownership and operation of infrastructure. There's already programs like that happening in the light duty area. Does that make sense in the heavy duty is one of the questions. And that we could ultimately end up with a win-win-win scenario to the extent we can do that both on air quality, rates, safety, and better stability for the grid.
They don't know how much cable to order because, so they understand, Oleg understands that.
So number 8, so
abandon the 2 sets.
we're hearing you on the phone. If you can mute your phone, please.
Right, cut this.
I guess that's not going to happen. Well, I'll continue. And then also about hydrogen, we wanted to make sure that hydrogen was considered in transportation electrification. As our understanding is the PUC does include that, so we want to make sure that stays on the forefront of the discussion. If there are, I already talked about the opportunities. And then LCFS, as many of you may be aware, AIRB administers a low carbon fuel standard to encourage production and use of renewable fuels. And there are, the credits from that can be earned by the fleet owners in some cases, especially when they're operating zero emission vehicles or electric vehicles. There was some discussion about whether the utilities could potentially account for those credits and credit those on the bill, which some utilities can, and there's no barrier to that. It's a double-edged sword to the extent that you don't manage your own when the sales are made and what the price is. It might not be an advantage. So I think to the extent that comes up as a discussion topic, we'll continue. This particular slide here, I just wanted to kind of point out because the focus on even the zero-emission vehicle strategies and other have been on light duty largely because there's a lot more light-duty vehicles. The policies and pushing forward that technology have been in place longer in a bigger period of time. I just kind of wanted to put in perspective, how the trucks and buses compare. Here I'm just showing a medium-duty truck, a smaller truck, and a bus to kind of say, in terms of electricity usage, a smaller package delivery type truck might be on the order of 7 to 8 cars. A larger bus and even a bigger truck would be well above 22 cars in terms of electricity use. So deploying 10 buses is actually a pretty substantial impact on the grid. Can be a benefit, a disadvantage, but kind of put that in perspective. And then lastly here, I just have some questions really on some of the items that I suspect will come up today, so I'm not looking for answers. But I was thinking that we maybe have an opportunity just to raise a few topics that I think some of these issues might be addressed as part of the discussions, and to the extent they're questions that we kind of just brainstormed. Is there a way to simplify the process, at least for certain projects that are more of a cookie cutter or standard design? Light duty vehicle policies are already in place and some are being expanded. Which ones of those make sense for heavy duty, which ones don't, and why? If you're looking at a fleet that does have passenger cars and trucks at the same location, are there differences that we need to manage and separate heavy duty from light duty or not? As I understand it, some of the smaller trucks and vans charge with car chargers and the same charging protocols. And so does that create new questions or issues? Onboard auxiliary systems, both for climate control, but also for power takeoff. There's a number of vehicles, the utilities themselves actually have vehicles that use a battery to power the boom of a bucket truck or a trouble truck. But the drivetrain itself is not electrified. Does that fit in the realm of transportation electrification or not? One basic question. Transportation refrigeration units themselves bring up a question. I know that there's electrification at truck stops, but how does it fit in the discussion if you have your transportation refrigeration unit on your truck itself versus if you have it on a trailer in a semi kind of application? Is that still part of the scope of what the utilities are looking at? just more broadly, because the ARB does represent the state, are there opportunities to make sure that there's commonality? We know that every utility is not the same and the programs aren't going to be identical, but are there opportunities to make sure that there's programs throughout the state so that you can kind of educate people on an approach and then just approach the utility, ask them to approach the utility for the details, but that the description and the expectations would be common? And then, where are the other synergies in terms of providing electricity, expanding renewable, and ultimately expanding the vehicle fleet? And then lastly, these two links are to the ARB's website, where we do have the two rulemakings that we're pursuing right now on buses and on trucks. Information about this particular meeting is going to be available on both websites. And the presentation materials will be posted at these links. And matter of fact, some of these presentations are already posted online. So that concludes my introductory comments, but hoping to open up the discussion. I think it would be appropriate to take in a few comments or questions or some things that people would like to see. We're going to move next into the PUC, given an overview, and then we'll transition to the next topic of having the utilities kind of identify some of the things they've been looking at or considering. So any comments right now or questions?
So Wednesday, then what they're worried about is that when they do the test and the cable comes back.
So those of you who are on the phone, if you can mute your phone so we don't hear your conversation, we'd appreciate that.
To purchase the new conductors.
Yes.
So we're back to square one.
Yes.
So.
And do we have money for that?
I don't know what the final
Yeah. So any comments or questions, anyone?
Yeah, that's
okay.
The problem.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll go ahead and switch over to the PUC presentation. So we're going to bring it up. Amy, do you want to take it away?
Under another project.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Let's see. Is my presentation up?
Me, yes. Me, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just 1 minute.
First decision, somebody has to stand.
Okay, we're ready, and if you wouldn't mind letting us know which slide you're on so that we'll stay in sync with you.
Okay, perfect.
Jurisdiction. Okay. Take it one step at a time. Technically, I say no.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Masrobian. I'm an analyst at the California Public Utilities Commission, or the state commission that oversees utilities, including the investor-owned electric utilities. So I'll give a brief overview of the upcoming transportation electrification work we'll be undertaking here.
I'm not the supervisor. I'm a supervisor of somebody.
So Senate Bill 350 from 2015 required a number of things, one of which was to accelerate widespread transportation electrification to help meet our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. You can move to slide 3, please.
This is I agree with you. It's fine with me. I'm not trying to say anything.
So in SB 350, transportation electrification is defined as the use of electricity from external sources of electrical power, including the electrical grid, for all or part of vehicles, vessels, trains, boats, or other equipment that are mobile sources of air pollution and greenhouse gases, and the related programs in charging and propulsion infrastructure investments to enable and encourage this use of electricity. So as you can see from the definition in SB 350, transportation electrification is pretty broad and it encompasses a number of sectors. So SB 350 also requires the CPUC, in consultation with our sister agencies ARB and the Energy Commission, to direct the electric IOUs and investor-owned utilities that we oversee to file applications for programs and investments to accelerate widespread transportation electrification. The objectives of these investments are to reduce petroleum usage, meet air quality standards, improve public health, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Slide 4, please.
Many people, and you solve the problem, and now people throw.
So in response to the language in SB 350, the CPUC has been implementing our portion of this. And so in September of this year, Commissioner Peterman of the CPUC issued a ruling directing the electric investor-owned utilities to file applications with us to propose transportation electrification investments pursuant to SB 350. So basically, each utility will develop a portfolio of programs and investments and submit this to us for our consideration. The guidance ruling from Commissioner Peterman identified a few basic requirements. So for the three large utilities, PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E, they'll file
Amy?
applications.
Amy?
Yeah?
I'm going to pause you for a moment. This is relatively disruptive. Will it work if we just hang up and have everybody dial back in?
Sure.
So, Amy, we're going to go ahead and, can we do that, or do we have, well, I want to make sure we can do it before we do it. Can we hang up?
No.
No, but let's try it. It's worth a shot. Yeah, we'll try hanging up and see if that makes the difference. I don't know that it will, but it's worth a shot. So those of you who are online or on the phone right now, we're going to hang up, and so I'd like you to hang up and then dial back in.
Okay, will do.
All right. Thank you. So sorry for the delay.
Chuck Smith and see what he thinks if we were to do that segment at a later time.
Oh, we can do it. So the question, if you give an option to do it, you have to be careful.
Welcome to the conference call. Your passcode has been confirmed. Please stand by as you are joined to your conference. There are 5 parties in conference, including yourself.
Regardless of my technical opinion, and get overridden because something more important.
Okay, that does not appear to have worked.
Okay, so Tony, we are trying to get another phone line, so if everybody can bear with us for like maybe 2 minutes. And also for people who are watching this webcast, we know that it's pretty hard to hear double audios here, so we're going to maybe, Tony, do you want to take a break for like 2 minutes? Or everybody can stretch for a little bit?
Yeah, let's come back in about 5 minutes. We're going to see if we can get a different phone line called into that, and we'll continue to try to get the person off the phone.
Honestly, to be honest with you, Tony,
Excellent. Normally we don't get a short break when Tony is hosting a meeting.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number.
Welcome to the conference calling center. Your passcode has been confirmed. Please stand by as you are joined to your conference. There are 3 parties in conference, including yourself.
Amy Mesrobian.
At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, simply hang up or press the pound key for further options.
Hi, Amy. This is Yachun Chao from ARB. We are trying to call you directly to have you only on the line. So if you get this message, please hang up, and we'll try to call you back again. Thanks.
To review or re-record your message, press 1. To mark your message urgent,
We're sorry. It is not necessary to dial a 1 or 0 when calling this number. Will you please hang up? Hi, this is Amy.
Hi, Amy. Thankfully, we reached you. We'll begin in just a second.
Okay, do you want me to start from the beginning, or is there a certain slide I should pick up
Yeah,
on?
let's go ahead and start over.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So Amy, we'll need a little bit of time to get people situated.
Okay. Yeah, just let me know.
So everyone, we're ready to get back on track. Please take your seats.
That's right.
Yeah. Might as well take an opportunity to come to the table. If you haven't done so, we got a few open spots. We're not giving a new number out. We're going to have Amy exclusively for now, and then we'll reset in a little while. The meeting is still being webcast. People can listen and participate via the webcast. We had also extended the phone line for those speakers who wouldn't be here that would be speaking. And so it's a pretty small group of individuals, but obviously it makes it difficult to hear. So, okay, so Amy, we're ready here in the room. And just out of curiosity, do you guys want her to start from the beginning again? Okay. Yeah, Amy, if you would please start over, we'd appreciate that.
Okay, sure. So my name is Amy Mazrobian. I'm an analyst at the California Public Utilities Commission. And today I'll just give a brief overview about our upcoming transportation electrification work at the CPUC as we work with the electric utilities. So slide 2, please. Okay. So Senate Bill 350 was signed in 2015, and among other things, it had a provision to accelerate widespread transportation electrification to help meet our state greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Slide 3, please. So in Senate Bill 350, it included a definition of transportation electrification, which is the use of electricity from external sources of electrical power, including the grid, for all or part of vehicles, vessels, trains, boats, or other equipment that are mobile sources of air pollution and greenhouse gases, and the related programs and charging and propulsion infrastructure investments to enable and encourage this use of electricity. So I just want to read that definition to highlight the fact that transportation electrification in statute is pretty broad and relates to a lot of different sectors and vehicle types. And so in SB 350, it required the CPUC, in consultation with ARB and the Energy Commission, to direct the electric investor-owned utilities that we oversee to file applications for programs and investments to accelerate widespread transportation electrification. And the objectives of these applications are to reduce petroleum usage, meet air quality standards, improve public health, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Slide 4, please. So Commissioner Peterman of the California Public Utilities Commission issued a ruling in September of this year to give the utilities some additional guidance as to what kind of applications they should file with us. And so this guidance basically described for each utility a portfolio of programs and investments that they should submit to the CPUC for our consideration. So some of the basic requirements are for the 3 large utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric, to file their applications in January of 2017. And then the 3 smaller utilities, Liberty, Bear Valley, and Pacific Corp, will file applications in June of 2017. We're also allowing adjacent large and small IOUs to propose joint programs, and basically every utility portfolio must show how their portfolio as a whole helps to accelerate transportation electrification, minimize costs, maximize benefits, meet those air quality and greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals for their territory. And so for our regulatory review of these utility applications, we've identified two sort of pathways. So for the smaller, shorter-term, non-controversial programs, we've signaled that we'd like to do more of a priority review of those proposals so that we can try to expedite the approval and implementation timeline of those programs. And some of the larger, perhaps more controversial proposals will go through our standard review. Slide 5, please. So I'll just go through this really briefly just to say that in the guidance ruling, the commissioner basically wanted to each utility to make sure that the scale and the scope of their proposed applications were going to help meet the really immense air quality and greenhouse gas goals in the state and in the utilities' particular territories. And we wanted to make sure that these applications and these proposals were aligned with other utility resource planning and other statewide emissions planning tools. Slide 6, please. And as far as portfolio design, there was an indication to address some of the priority programs and projects. So one of those things is rate design to make sure that we're giving drivers the right incentive to charge their vehicles at times that's beneficial to the grid, and making sure that we can do what we can to make electricity a cost-effective fuel for drivers. Next, and important to this group, is we've recognized that a lot of the investor-owned utility work to date has focused a lot on the light-duty sector. And while that sector will continue to be important, we wanted to expand the focus to include the medium and heavy-duty sector as well, because we know that to meet our greenhouse gas and air quality goals, it's really going to be important to look at a number of different sectors. And then the third bullet is just to leverage the results of previous pilots. So the utilities and others have done a lot of research in this space, and we want to understand what's been done, what are the lessons learned, and how can we build off of those lessons to create new utility programs and investments that will really take advantage of infrastructure and rate design and other programs to more fully integrate transportation electrification with the grid in mind. And then finally, the last 2 points are we want to make sure that all of these programs are aligned with local, regional, and state transportation electrification planning and investments, and that they all have an eye towards safety. Slide 7, please. So this slide just sort of gives an overview of how the CPUC has been implementing the transportation electrification provisions in SB 350. So 2016 has sort of been our planning and guidance year. We had workshops and got comments from stakeholders to figure out how we should give direction to the utilities about their forthcoming transportation electrification applications. And so I mentioned in September, Commissioner Peterman issued some guidance to the utilities about what we wanted to see in those applications. And that was just adopted via formal CPUC ruling, or a formal CPUC decision last week. And so now our next steps in December of this year, we're going to have a few workshops. One for the IOUs, along with the CEC and some other organizations to talk about the results of some of their pilots. And then another workshop on vehicle grid integration standards. So we're trying to get, make sure that parties and stakeholders are aware of all the work that's going on so that they can continue to participate in our CPUC process once the utilities do file their applications next year. And throughout the year, we've been conferring a lot with our counterparts at the Energy Commission and ARB to make sure that we each understand each other's capabilities, and if there's something that ARB is really good at is looking at emissions impacts. And so we've been working with ARB to figure out when we're evaluating these utility transportation electrification applications. Do we have all of the right tools to be able to assess the greenhouse gas emissions impacts of these pilots? So we'll continue to work with our sister agencies throughout the SB 350 implementation process. In 2017, again, we're expecting the utilities to file their applications. So January, which is coming up pretty soon, the 3 large IOUs will file their application, and then midway through the year, the 3 smaller IOUs will file their applications as well. And so I think we've given the utilities some guidance, but we've allowed a lot of flexibility to let them think outside the box and be creative. So we're really excited to see what they put forward in a few months. And then 2018 and beyond is really the utilities will be implementing the programs that we've approved or modified and approved in their applications. And just moving to the last slide, slide 8. I wanted to keep this short, but that's my contact information. If you have any additional questions, I'm hoping to stay on the line today to get a lot of additional feedback, especially from folks in the heavy-duty sector. But yeah, happy to take any questions.
Amy, we do have questions, so we're going to pass the microphones around.
Okay.
And remember, please identify yourself, a name and affiliation.
Hi, good morning. Ryan Kinney with Clean Energy. Slide number 3, I just want to add a quick question. I was wondering, it mentions that do not unfairly compete with non-utility enterprises. How does the PUC ensure that the utility does not unfairly compete?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's something that we've spent quite a bit of time on, in our current consideration of utility applications. And basically what we've done is look at utility applications on a case-by-case basis and determine if they've made reasonable considerations in their program to make sure that they're not unfairly competing with third-party providers, let's say. So, our goal as state regulators is to use the tools that we have to try to increase transportation electrification. But we don't want to just rely on the utilities so much that there's no third-party participation at all. So we're looking at ways to make sure that even with large-scale utility participation, there are still opportunities for third parties and others to kind of compete in that space. But we don't have really a set of metrics. It's really just been kind of case-by-case at this point.
So, Amy, this is Yaqin Chao from ARB. I just want to clarify your answer here. So by third-party provider, you're talking about other third-party providers that also are supporting and also providing service to transportation electrification, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that does not include things outside of transportation electrification. Is that correct?
Can you provide some examples, maybe?
So basically, the purpose of the program is to support transportation electrification. And the CPUC's position is to ensure that other third-party TE providers have kind of the same, they do not lose advantage to utilities just because utilities, they might be bigger in capital or other things, but you're not talking about other transportation means such as conventional combustion technologies.
I guess we're sort of technology neutral. We're looking at things more as they relate to the electrical grid. So I would say if a utility can come in and provide a service and maybe partner with a third party, that seems like a good opportunity to me. But we're not at the CPUC so much focused on the specific vehicle or the specific technologies, except as they kind of relate to grid impacts and utility impacts.
Okay, Ray?
Hi, Amy. This is Ray Pingle from Sierra Club. So after the IOU applications are filed in January, how long are you expecting the PUC to take to render a decision on those applications so that implementation can begin?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's hard to say right now just because we don't really have a sense of how big of applications they're going to propose and how perhaps controversial they might be. But the reason that we have that kind of two-step regulatory review or kind of two-phase regulatory review is because we want to get as much going as quickly as possible. So I think our goal is, so for the large utilities are going to file in January. So I think we're hoping that for the smaller, non-controversial projects, we would be able to approve those in 2017. And then for the larger projects, I think it's just harder to say at this point, just based on how many come in and how different they are and how big they are. But I think, within a year we should have at least the first round of programs approved.
Amy, this is Yaqun Chao from ARB again. I just have a question following Ray's question. So by project, does CPUC think about it as a single project, or does CPUC consider that as a project type? So for example, if we have an IOU here today saying that I want to do, say, transit agency type of projects, do they have to identify which transit agency they have to partner with before January 3rd, or they can submit some generic application that, okay, I want to do like a transit type of projects, but I can bring in transit agencies one by one. They may not be on board by January 3rd, but we also believe that maybe they fall into this kind of a smaller but also very kind of easy project type. So if a CPUC can approve the project type instead of a single project, maybe they can continue to bring in more transit agencies.
Sure. So would you mind going back to slide 4, please? So the bottom half of that slide just talks about regulatory review. And so we've said that we have a priority review process for the non-controversial short-term investments, which are less than $4 million per project. And so if something is, let's say, a pilot project, and maybe the utility has a certain transit agency in mind that they want to work with, and it's going to meet these criteria, then that sounds like it might be a good candidate for this priority review project. If it's a much larger program that's going to be ongoing for multiple years, then that sounds like a bigger program that might go through our standard review process. And so we know that the utilities might not have all of the details of all of the proposed programs worked out when they submit their applications in January. And that's okay, but we want to basically know as much information as possible to try to make our decision and develop these programs.
Okay, so there aren't any more comments at this point. And again, we'll have an open discussion period as well. To continue the dialogue and close coordination efforts, Noel Cristosomo can provide an overview of the CEC's actions and role. And if you aren't aware, he was with the PUC and is now with the Energy Commission to improve coordination. So sometimes transferring staff to a different agency can maybe improve that. So Noel, in your new role, can you identify what the CEC is doing as well in this area?
Sure. Thanks for the welcome, Tony. And given that I'm still relatively new at the CEC, I'd like to also introduce my colleague Andre Freeman, who works is a supervisor for the medium and heavy duty section in the Fuels and Transportation Division. And so you can ask him all the hard questions. But there are three major areas that the CEC is working on that can help support electrification in the medium and heavy duty sector. The first area is making strategic investments to demonstrate electric transportation vehicle and charging technology, deploy infrastructure, and increase local manufacturing capacity to reduce the state's greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, as well as improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas. These strategic investments are funded primarily through the annual Alternative and Renewable Fuel Vehicle Technology Program. That funds $100 million from the AB8 program. Right now, the CEC is developing its 2017-2018 ARFETP investment plan, and the investment areas that the medium and heavy-duty fleet sector might be interested in crosses four areas. Advanced freight and fleet technology, where the proposed allocation is $18 million. Advanced vehicle manufacturing, $5 million, emerging opportunities, $4 million, and workforce training and development at $3.5 million. So from a variety of perspectives, whether it be deploying infrastructure, building manufacturing capacity, or interesting new projects for testing technology or developing the employment base of this new sector, there are ways for the CEC to assist in the electrification of the transportation sector. I'll give some examples from previous ARFETP investments now. For the medium and heavy-duty vehicles, there have been demonstrations. Most recently, almost $12 million were dispersed for two projects focused on ports in San Diego and Los Angeles, where 8 battery electric vehicle yard trucks, 4 battery electric vehicle drayage trucks, and 3 battery electric vehicle forklifts were funded, as well as 20 low NOx yard trucks. In addition, intelligent transportation system investments around platooning and geolocation were invested in through ARFETP. And later this year, in this demonstration segment, the CEC will administer a $27 million grant funding opportunity with a continued focus on seaports. And Andre, do you know when that will be released? Okay, TBD. So please sign up for the ARFETP listserv online. Some additional questions that the CEC will investigate via this ARFETP rulemaking is technology or application neutrality, balance between infrastructure deployment and vehicle demonstrations, and also balancing between early technology demonstration and large vehicle or large deployments. And lastly, determination on how much to spend on intelligent transportation systems. So questions to those concepts will be further developed through the ARFETP. In addition, advanced vehicle manufacturing is a key element of CEC's investments. Recently, the CEC awarded $10 million for 4 projects to expand existing facilities and to expand new manufacturing capacity. These cover powertrain component development for all segments of TE, and investments included, investment recipients included Proterra, TransPower, and Efficient Drivetrains Incorporated. Regarding ARFETP, Commissioner Scott held an advisory committee meeting on November 4th, and comments were received last Thursday, and staff will be compiling comments to further develop and finalize the investment plan. The second major area that the CEC is working on is leading in the development and commercialization of new technology and the R&D necessary to achieve widespread deployment of electric transportation technology. So in addition to the ARFETP, the CEC implements the Electric Program Investment Charge program, which was a successor to the PEER program, Public Interest Energy Research Program. It's funded by the Public Utilities Commission's ratepayers, and EPIC and ARFETP will be extremely important to enable the fleets that you're managing in transit and municipal government to reduce their charging costs, essentially, through new charging control and optimization technologies that are being tested in electric vehicles right now. But the point is, these are extremely scalable and transferable technologies across the light-duty space and the heavy-duty space. A few projects that have been invested in were EPRI's distribution system-aware vehicle-to-grid service for improved grid reliability and system stability, UCLA's demonstration of PEV smart charging and storage, Andromeda Power's incisive project for a grid communication interface for smart EV services, and the Department of Defense's Los Angeles vehicle-to-grid project. So each of those projects will help inform how to manage the fleet's duty cycles while also reducing costs on the system for your own costs, as well as the distribution and transmission systems of the electric utility and independent system operator at large. So as Amy mentioned, staff at the CEC will be working jointly with the PUC to hold 2 workshops in December on vehicle grid integration. The first is on December 7th regarding communications for vehicle grid integration services, and on December 12th regarding the state's research and investments under the Vehicle Grid Integration Roadmap, which was established in 2014. The third and last point that I'll bring up today around the CEC's responsibilities is it's assisting the state's publicly owned utilities achievement of their integrated resource plan objectives for transportation electrification. So along the PUC guidance coming out of SB 350, this CEC plays a parallel and similar role for the publicly owned utilities. In this case, the POUs are responsible for considering electrification in their integrated resource plans, which must be submitted by January 1, 2019 and updated at least 5 years thereafter. So the CEC does not have as much direct regulatory authority over the POUs as the PUC has over the IOUs, but we nevertheless will review the RFPs adopted by those POUs for consistency with SB 350, and if needed, provide comments, suggestions, and requests for more information. This is a proceeding that is primarily intended to explore the capabilities and challenges of the POUs and help bring them up to speed, given the great deal of learnings that the state has generated through its decades of investments in electric vehicles. Critical areas for the CEC's oversight include planning for electric vehicle growth, funding charging infrastructure and utility system upgrades, and addressing the impacts of electric passenger vehicles, transit buses, and freight trucks on grid management, renewable electricity growth, and accounting for greenhouse gas emissions. Publicly owned utilities account for roughly a quarter of the electricity load in the state, and so they will, and since a lot of the transit agencies are somewhat related to municipal government, they will play a extremely important role in facilitating the development of widespread transportation electrification. So CEC staff held a workshop in early October, and it'll continue to work closely with the ARB and PUC to ensure that lessons are leveraged and the POU's plans are consistent with other state goals, but also flexible given their capabilities. And I have cards, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions right now? Okay. So rather than taking a break right now, since we already took one, we'd like to go ahead and move into the discussion about the utility perspectives on programs for transportation electrification. To kind of go over what the current programs are, some synergies that we might envision in the future, and then to the extent that they have questions for fleet managers, we have fleets represented in the audience as well. It's an opportunity to have a dialogue on those issues. So, Jana, are you going to be the first one? I think you can speak from there. That'd be fine.
Okay. Good afternoon or good morning. Jana Corey with PG&E. And we're really, really pleased to be here. Obviously, we're eager to learn from all of you. This is a new space, not only for the utilities, but for all of us, I guess, in some ways, transportation electrification. We have a keen interest, of course, in supporting that. It helps with state policy objectives. It's going to help us manage our grid impacts. I like to tell people that there's a lot of excitement around the smart charging and how we're going to use the infrastructure and these electric vehicles for grid services. But until we get the vehicles on the road, we don't have enough scale to do anything. So really we focus hard on figuring out how we can help with the barriers to adoption in this space. And I think the background that Tony and Amy and Noel just laid out is really helpful in setting the stage for where the investor-owned utilities are to date. Just a reminder, the utility toolkit is not very big. We got 4 things in our toolkit. One is infrastructure. You may know us as an infrastructure company. That's what we do. We're pretty good at it. And this is a lot of the EV infrastructure is an extension of our existing grid. So we think we're well situated to help the state move electrification forward through our grid investments. Obviously, we have rate design, education and outreach, and then experimenting or trials with grid integration. And that's a huge issue. Many of you know this, but excuse me, not everybody. We're in a situation where in certain months of the year, certain hours of the day, we're over generation with the massive amount of solar we have on our grid in the Central Valley. So one of the things that we're looking at is trying to understand how we can use these vehicles charging as a tool to take up that excess solar generation, which is only going to become a bigger and bigger problem as more and more renewables come online. So today, we are dealing with the issue of overgeneration at certain parts of the year in certain geographies. So this is a real issue for the utilities right now. We've spent a lot of time thinking about our guiding principles. Obviously, these are matches to what the state's objectives are and what the assigned commissioner's ruling laid out. But really, our goals at PG&E are to increase access to electricity as a transportation fuel, enable the market, and support grid management using the tools in our toolkit. We're obviously here for supporting the state's climate, air quality, and equity policies. We're looking at, in this particular sphere, transportation electrification, we're not looking at early stage technology development. We're looking at commercializing commercially scaled products. So, for example, if there's a low NOx engine that's come on the market that's commercially available, we would that would be something that would be interesting to us, not very early stage technologies. And then finally, we're looking to marry our investments with other state, federal, and private funding. So I think Amy already went over what the assigned commissioners ruling requested, but really we're very interested, and our SB 350 proposal that's due in January is not fully developed or fully baked, but in the spirit of transparency, I will mention the signature piece of our filing is most likely going to address medium and heavy duty and off-road market space. And what we want to do is figure out how much of this market can we support and what are the tools that we bring to bear on this market. So we're looking at a 3 to 5 year program, looking at the market forecasts for penetration and understanding how much of that market can we support and what can we bring to bear to support that market. We're also very focused on disadvantaged communities for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is we think they're inordinately affected by some of the NOx emissions, some of the issues around that, and a lot of our market runs through those disadvantaged communities. And then the priority projects, what we're trying to focus on is there a demonstration project that we can select that will inform this broader transportation electrification in medium, heavy duty, and off-road. So what you'll see coming out in January most likely will have a demonstration project around these sectors, a couple of the very specific sectors, and then you'll see a bigger full-scale application. So, don't hold me to that, but I think that's where we're going to land. I also wanted to mention there's a key debate going on in California about the most effective way for the utilities to be involved in the market space. And specifically, you see the utility infrastructure on the left up to the meter, then there's the electric panel, and then the conduit that goes out to the charger. So there's a variety of places the utility could bring infrastructure investment to bear. The whole thing up to the car, or some portion of the rest of this picture. So we are looking at where we can be most effective with our dollars in meeting other investment participants. The other thing we hear a lot of discussion about is how our rates and rate design can make it easier or more difficult for adoption in the electric vehicle space. And I wanted to, for those of you who aren't utility wonks and don't follow the rate-making process at the PUC, there's a big consideration right now to moving the time of use rate periods out in time. So in 2019, I think we're going to be moving these block peak rates out to a later period of time. So as you're thinking about your own operations, think about how you can take advantage of that. The off-peak period is getting much longer during the day, and the on-peak period is moving out after, I believe, 6 p.m. So these things, this won't be finalized or completely through the regulatory process, but this is where the rates are moving. And then the other thing that people talk a lot about, and we talked a lot about this in the April proceeding, was the way the utilities price the products that we offer. We provide, you get an energy demand, an energy price for each kWh that you use, and we had to build a certain roadway to your facility, and so the size of that roadway or the peak demand that your facility will require is what we call our demand charge, and we charge for the size of the roadway we have to bring energy in on. So those are two pieces. They're real costs, and so what we did an experiment recently on the transit side where we said, let's pilot where we provide an incentive by removing the demand charge. And that's an example of a way you might use a rate as an incentive. We're not necessarily promoting that, but we think that was an example of how you'd look at rates to try and promote public policy. I would emphasize that from the utilities perspective, these are real costs, and we need to be economically honest about how we charge for the cost of the product that we offer, and we can think about incentives or opportunities to move markets by doing something slightly different. So that's opening for us. Okay. I'm happy to take questions, or do you want to wait for questions till after all the utilities speak?
I think it's up to the group, but well, I guess Noel has we'll take a few questions and then we can make it more open.
I actually realized I had jotted some notes down while you all were talking, and I had a couple other points I wanted to make. Sure. We have a portfolio at PG&E of products and services that are related to this transportation electrification space, and I just wanted to talk about it for a moment. I gave you one example of how we did a rate pilot. Our own fleet, we have 1,400 passenger vehicles in our own fleet, and they're all hybrid electrics. Our actual utility equipment is one of the greenest alternative fuel fleets in the country. And we're experimenting and working with EDI to upfit our utility trucks, these big booms and buckets and all that, with what they call electric power takeoff equipment, which allows you to turn your internal combustion engine off and run your utility equipment using electricity. And the added benefit of that is it's an exportable energy power unit, which allows you, in fact, in the last year when we had those huge fires up on the North Coast, we were able to export power off the utility truck to serve, keep the emergency organizations live. So we couldn't keep the whole North Coast live with the truck, but we were able to keep the emergency services groups live with exportable power. So there's a lot of really, this off-road category is very exciting. And if you can allow a truck who has a refrigerated unit or needs to idle to keep the cab live, if you can turn the internal combustion engine off, I think that's real transportation electrification value. So I wanted to make that point. And then, so in our portfolio, we're doing a lot of research and development. So you may know about our partnership with BMW that's looking at using 100 light-duty vehicles to actually allow us to curtail charging for 1 hour across that fleet. And that's been a very successful utility pilot. And then we're also, we're live at the commission right now with our light-duty project. And we have light-duty passenger or residential rates for electric vehicles that are very attractive to charge at night, very attractive rates. So we have a portfolio in each of the light-duty, medium-duty, heavy-duty space, both rates, research, and infrastructure investments. So now, sorry, Noel.
Thanks, Jana. You might not be able to answer this until January, but for the rate design changes, do you think that a proposal will be submitted as part of the SB 350 application, or potentially through the regular course of the general rate cases? And to your point around incentives to change behavior, do you have ideas around what form those incentives would come by? For example, could they be like a fleet optimization implementation software, or like a rebate for energy storage? What are you thinking right now?
Okay, so with regard to your first question about rates, first of all, let me just acknowledge the CPUC and the ACR did a great job of leaving the door open for filings in January, but also subsequent filings. It's very explicit that this is the first of many transportation electrification opportunities. So we looked at that and said, great, we're going to have an opportunity to stand up some other programs as we go through the year next year. We felt that it was with the new TOU rates coming online next year, they were going to provide some incentives for changed behavior. We are not likely to come forward in January with a rate offering at this time, but it's on our portfolio plan as a subsequent filing. And we felt that we needed to spend more time with our transit friends and our medium and heavy duty friends. We have an EV rate for light duty, remember? But for this sector, we felt that we needed a lot more homework to understand what was going to be helpful and effective before we launched a rate. Also, we've agreed with LADWP and Southern California Edison that both have rates in this category, that we're going to sit down with them and their primary customers and understand what's worked and what's not worked. So with regard to your other question, one of the things that I'm anticipating, and I hope that we see this in January, is bringing all the things that we have to bear to a specific demonstration project. So technical advisory services around how to manage around the existing rates, how to operationalize, how to set up your operations to most effectively reduce the costs of your capability, of your charging infrastructure, bringing charging infrastructure into the picture ourselves, providing, in the case if you're in a disadvantaged community, potentially some sort of incentive to help pay for the charger itself. And then with regard to other incentives, I think the utility is best positioned to bring infrastructure in, and that's a huge incentive. So, you know, we all, I know all the utilities cooked up about, 40 different ideas that we could bring forward in January, and we had to winnow that down to the ones that we felt were most high value. So that's where we're landing. Anyway.
Was a comment back here?
Yeah, Jana, Bill Westerfield with SMUD right behind you. Hi. Could you talk a little bit more about your rate pilot without a demand charge, what your endpoints are, how far into it you are, and what you're seeing?
Yes, it was a 3-year pilot that just ended in September or October last month. And we only have one large transit agency that took advantage of it. And they were pretty committed anyway to the electric vehicle market. I think it helped them during the time they were on that. It's a pretty significant savings. So. There's one over there.
Great. Yeah. Hi, Jenna. So, I think one of the roles that the utilities can play in helping transit agencies and other medium and heavy-duty fleet operators electrify is, now they're working in the electric sector, and it's a territory that's not familiar to them. And there's so many ways to optimize electricity costs to get them the lowest. And, some of the, like in the electric bus sector, there are some companies that offer some modeling tools on this. CARP's got a very good cost calculator for battery electric buses. But what do you see as the role for the IOUs, and your role specifically, in helping to provide some internal expertise that's dedicated to this, has modeling tools, simulation tools, can identify best practices and so on, and help these transit agencies and fleet operators really come up with this battery storage, it's when we charge, it's group charging, all these different things. And should we build solar plants to help do this, maybe even off-site solar plants to come up with the best optimal solution?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're hoping to do in January is propose this idea of a demonstration project. So we want to partner with one of either the transit agencies or one of the light duty or medium duty fleets that's interested in electrifying, and spend time with them to talk about how they might optimize around the rates and reduce their costs. So I think that demonstration project is our opportunity to bring all of the resources of the utility at one customer site understand, bring money, expertise, and that's our opportunity to learn about how we can best serve this market sector. Right now, we're just inexperienced in the space. We're open to ideas, and I hope today we'll get a lot of insights, but I think we have to put a concentrated demonstration project together to help us best, essentially embed ourselves with one of these agencies or fleet owners to try and really understand what are they seeing day to day. My team went out and spent some time with the San Joaquin Transit Agency and got a tremendous amount of insight out of one afternoon. So I think if we embed our engineering staff out there, our rates guys understand what's happening, how can we best serve that market? I think that's going to be really helpful and informative. And one other thing, Noel, to your question about incentives, we are looking at maybe bringing storage in as well as part of this demonstration project. So that might be one of these things where we can talk about that as an incentive of some sort. Either we bring it in and own it, or we underwrite in some fashion. So we haven't quite figured out what this demonstration project, what the elements are going to be, what the financial elements are going to be. But my vision is that it's a really hands-on way for the utilities to learn about how to serve this market the best.
Comment back here.
See if this works. Nico Baukum with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. Thank you, Jenna, for that explanation. I had a question that was based on a comment you made when you started your presentation about, I think you mentioned something along the lines that electric vehicles currently don't make a large impact on your grid. Do you have a sense on at what point, or based on some of the assumptions shown by ARB earlier, at what point it will have an impact on your grid, either locally or on a larger scale?
So generally speaking, or at the highest level, we modeled out to like 2030 what we thought the load impact would be, and it would be on the order of 5%. So it's not significant in the aggregate. What we really have difficulty with is in the geography specific. So if you have an aggregation, the way I like to think about this is we have like 5 houses on every transformer, and a car is like the size of an electric car is like the size of a house. So suddenly you got a 20% load with one vehicle on every, with million transformers. So to me, it's more about the specific and the geography. And then if we have an aggregation of vehicles and it either has impact on the grid negatively, or it has positive impact because we can control in some fashion with smart charging. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Okay, so now we can move on to Edison.
Tony, I have another question, if I may. Okay. Jenna, thanks so much for the great presentation. This is Yachun Cha from ARB. I just have 2 questions here. You mentioned about that in January, PG&E may kind of submit some demo projects. So is PG&E kind of reaching out to find your demo projects, or you would like some of the fleet managers to contact PG&E to be part of your proposal?
So we haven't exactly decided how we would recruit that partner. I think it has to be someone who's really ready to go live with electric vehicles, either in their fleet or in their transit. And we've met with several of the transit agencies. So always eager to have interested partners in the space. So people can contact me or wait. We probably won't, as I think you pointed out earlier, we probably won't come to the commission in January with a partner. We'll probably talk about how we're going to recruit for a partner.
I see. So Jenna, my second question here is that as you pointed out in your slide number 5, the importance of a time of charge and also the peak rate. We know that the demand charge, the peak rate, they are kind of quite important for transit agency or for any fleet managers to think about when they're trying to strategize their charging method. So we also know that within California utilities, they are facing a lot of changes and also requirements in the upcoming years, such as the RPS, and also such as the continued declining state greenhouse gas target, and also other anticipations such as energy storage. And also we also know that we're also seeing hotter and hotter summers. And also a lot of electricity is also being used for air conditioning, this and that. So how do you think that utilities might be forecasting or change the time of use, the peak charts over years, and how fleets, they should kind of prepare themselves in response to this kind of changes?
So let me just say that the process for changing rates like this, where we're moving the peak block out in time, is glacial at best. So the utilities rates do not change every day. This is just not the way we work. So if you're trying to do your own economic evaluation of what the utility rates will be going forward, you can look historically at how often the rates have changed and what the dramatic or lack of drama is in the changes. In fact, I think at the last workshop, someone showed a change in gas prices relative to a change in electricity prices, and the electricity prices are just enormously predictable. They basically go up 3% a year, and they have for 2 decades, as long as I've been in the business. So it's fairly, I understand that that's an important input to the economic modeling. So I don't know, Noel, if you have a perspective on that, or Amy.
We talked about this a great deal during the last workshop, but in San Diego, there's a experimental rate. I'm not sure if San Diego's presenting today, but yeah, that's kind of the big question around how flexible of rates should we be serving. And I mean, it was a little bit glacial to get through the VGI rate and the infrastructure proposal for San Diego, but it's not impossible necessarily.
Yeah, and just anything that does relate back to the prior meeting we had on April 8th, all the presentations are online, so if people do want to reference those, they can. I'm going to go, there's a comment over here, but I'm going to go ahead and just read a comment that came in. So this is from Christian Peoples from AC Transit. The comment is, it's concerning that there's no mention of electricity produced hydrogen in this webinar. Hydrogen provides the best source of electricity for heavy-duty fleets that come home at night. Buses, delivery trucks, drayage trucks, etc. It also provides for long-term, months or years, storage of electricity. So that's his general comment. So to the extent that we continue the dialogue, to the extent that hydrogen is in your plans, by all means, identify that.
Okay, well, I'll just make one last comment on that. We think alternative fuels have a really important role to play here. Hydrogen, natural gas, in the overall electrification, in the overall transportation sector. I believe this was just focused on electrification. So,
but I guess I'll
please jump right.
Clarify here. From ARB's perspective, we do believe that hydrogen produced specifically for transportation should be in the realm of transportation electrification, having the advantage of the vehicle doesn't have to be present to generate hydrogen, especially from electrolysis, for instance. So. Is that inconsistent with PG&E's view?
No, our corporate strategy team is really active in this hydrogen space right now. We've been in conversation with the vehicle manufacturers in that sphere. So we are looking.
So thank you.
So Jana, I had one question for you. You mentioned energy storage as part of a potential project. So were you looking at PG&E deploying the energy storage on behalf of, say, a transit agency to, I don't know, mitigate demand charges, for example, or what was your thoughts there?
So at this point, first of all, I think we think I think that storage is going to be an important tool in managing demand charges, period. I don't think we've landed on the ownership or the subsidy or the non-ownership of how we're going to use that. So, good question.
Okay. So we can go ahead and transition to Edison, and then we'll cover additional questions after that.
Great, thanks, Tony. I'm Eric Salo. I'm project managing the January application for Southern California Edison. Also project managed on the Charge Ready application, so I have a lot of familiarity with this space. Thanks for everybody coming out. There's a lot of people here, and that's really exciting because, as Jana had mentioned, this is definitely a new space for us, the medium and heavy duty space, and so Edison is very open to partnerships and working with you guys and really understanding your businesses and the structures and how different types of transportation electrification fit into those models. And I think that I'll address some of the challenges or questions that we have sort of immediately to kind of get a conversation going, but would love to continue it offline after this. So Southern California Edison, in addition to SB 350 and the GHG requirements in the states, has some unique requirements because of the air quality in the South Coast Air Quality Management District, which has us focus specifically on activities within the Port of Long Beach that relate to medium and heavy duty and off-road deployments. And so this area, and specifically the disadvantaged communities within our area, are a specific focus of us going forward in and above the GHG requirements for the state. And so our work to date in this space really revolved around research and development, activity and electrification of our own fleet. Jana mentioned some of the bucket trucks. We're doing similar work there, as well as light duty fleet deployments. Work with the Port of Long Beach in their electrification efforts that are moving along, and some work with transit agencies, specifically Foothill, within our service territory. And we're also experimenting with some VGI pilots with the Los Angeles Air Force Base, and some school bus VGI pilots in the more heavy duty space. But I'd like to focus a little bit more on sort of what we're looking at in the future going forward. And the way SCE is approaching this is really looking at what can we do to incentivize adoption of these cleaner technologies and get the GHG reductions and air quality improvements. And so we do have a limited toolbox of where we can work within the value chain of electric vehicles. And there are some areas where that would be prioritized in the near term. And so Edison right now believes that the areas that we work that immediately impacts the medium and heavy duty space revolve around rates, infrastructure deployment, and education and outreach to incentivize these types of cleaner vehicle sales. We also have this role with VGI and second life batteries, et cetera. But as for the January application, we think that the higher priority is getting these vehicles on the road and trying to really incentivize that adoption. So within these tools and within these projects, unfortunately, we don't have the projects fully baked and approved by management. But we are planning on having some specific smaller pilot projects, or just smaller projects rather, at the port, dealing with rubber tire gantry cranes and some yard hustlers, some off-road heavy duty equipment down at the port, providing the infrastructure for those. And I think the real keystone of this application is going to be an infrastructure play for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And so how vertical that goes is still TBD, whether it's a similar make-ready type of proposal that we did in Charge Ready, where then the customer is responsible for procuring the charging station themselves and the vehicle, or if it's something that might be more vertical. And I'm really looking forward to feedback on whether you as fleet operators want to own and operate your charging infrastructure, and whether the utility might be better served in that capacity with regards to your operation. And then I also think that EV awareness, or specifically awareness within the sector and understanding of the rate structure and operations is an area where the utility can play an important role. So this education and outreach. Currently, in the Charge Ready pilot, we had proposed funding for TE advisory services, where the utility would be doing just this. And so we are restricted from expanding on our advisory services because they're in the pilot, and the pilot needs to be finished and assessed before we can expand that proposal. But we are looking at ways where we can reach out to these specific customers and assist them in their guidance for electrification going forward. And we are planning on having a rate component within the application itself. So I can't talk about the details on that rate component, but it takes a really hard look at decreasing demand charges and those shifting time of use periods that Jana had mentioned. And so I think going forward, we're really trying to identify ways that the utility can really speed up this market, and we're approaching these projects as market transformational, broadening the scope of where we're playing in the vehicle segments that we're looking at, whether it's ETRUs or delivery trucks, or off-road vehicles, or heavy-duty trucking, and then also playing a very significant scale. The adoption of these technologies and the lowering of emissions and improving air quality are extremely important for Southern California Edison. So I mentioned earlier that we have some challenges going forward in designing these programs, and that's really, I think we just have some blind spots with regards to the timing of these applications and the review process and how they line up with fleet operators' business models, and getting assurances and funding sort of allocated for them, whether that timing lines up, and then also the operations within the market. I think the deployment for technologies for a single shift operation, it's going to be very different for deployment for someone that has a 24/7 shift operation. So how utility could shape a program that is applicable to everybody, and really understanding what those operations look like, and specifically some load shapes regarding that. And then also identifying sort of charging station standards and how the utility can really assist in moving this market forward, and providing low-cost solutions and helping push standardization within this market, and identifying and working with the fleet operators in the stranded asset area. So that's one of the potential challenges with these large programs and fleets that could potentially be moving locations, and identifying how we can work with and have programs that are flexible in order to not have stranded asset costs, because we are spending ratepayer dollars, and so we are very, very cognizant about that. But I think generally that's a very high-level overview. I think there were a lot of questions for Jan, and so I'm open for any questions or information that the group may have. Okay.
So David, I want to give you an opportunity to ask your question, even if it's not for Edison, but then I'll open up with a few questions more broadly. And I do have a comment, and I'll wait.
David Rentschler, City of Fairfield. I'm just kind of curious, a lot of talk about infrastructure, a lot of talk about SB 350 and off-road vehicles being electrified, heavy-duty vehicles being electrified. So as a fleet manager, I write specifications and design both on and off-road equipment, and have come across quite a few challenges over the last few years. One of the things I'd like to ask is, in SB 350, I haven't read the whole thing, and I don't know if anybody in here could answer, is there any infrastructure on roadways that has been addressed for the heavier vehicles that are going to be needed for the electric vehicles?
Well, I guess I'll start. Well, no, if you have a response, or do you have a different? Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't have a great answer here.
So the definition of transportation electrification includes charging and propulsion infrastructure, quote, for electric transportation. And so it doesn't define that the charging only is limited to like pedestal-based fueling, if that's what your question around roadways was.
No, my question was, in California, it's the only state in the nation that has a 34,000 pound maximum tandem axle weight, while everybody else has 40,000 pounds. So on a 10-wheel dump truck, you need 1/6 more dump trucks in California than you do in any other state. So you could reduce emissions by increasing the amount that a tandem axle could have on the roadway. And then is the reason we have lower 34,000 pound tandem axle weights here in California because the roads can't handle it? Or is it because of some other reason? Because you could reduce emissions quite a bit. Matter of fact, 1/6 of dump trucks. So as a person who specs vehicles, I recently had spec'd a 10-wheel dump truck as light as I could with all aluminum parts and air tanks and anything you could think of to reduce weight, because it needs to, for our water department, needs to haul rock out to backfill when they have a water main break, and so they have a trailer with a backhoe on that's being pulled by this truck because they don't have enough operators and enough money to buy equipment for multiple trucks. And so it ends up being at the maximum allowable weight when it has rock in it and it's towing a backhoe out to a site to fix a water main break. So now if we go with an electric heavy-duty truck, we're going to add weight to the truck, and now it's going to be overweight, or you're going to need 2 trucks. And then your off-road equipment, if you're talking about electric off-road equipment, that backhoe that it's pulling on the trailer is going to be heavier. So no matter what, you're going to be overweight. And then I also had to write specifications last year on a lowboy semi and a 10-wheel day cab semi so that we could haul a new grinder, asphalt grinder, to grind roadways in our town. And again, I put as light of components as possible on the truck and reduced the weight as much as possible. Worked with the trailer manufacturer to come up with the lightest trailer we could. And I now have an overweight permit just to haul our grinder. So if that grinder was electric, it would be too heavy for me to get a standard overweight permit. The truck, the day cab semi, if it was electric, that would put the total weight over by an extreme amount. So I want to know, has those items been discussed and thought about in SB 350, where if we increase the roadway limits to allow for these electric heavy-duty and off-road vehicles, has anybody thought about that? And if they have, we could increase the weight limits now and have less trucks on the road and reduce emissions that way. Thank you.
So, Chris, you have your hand up. Do you want to respond to that? Because I know trucking is, this is I think what you're raising, David, is broadly a larger issue, the transportation electrification. I guess I'll just put my 2 cents. And so from the ARB's perspective, when we are looking at regulatory strategies for trucks in particular, we're looking to understand those particular issues that you're raising, and we're trying to identify where electrification makes the most sense, economic sense, where the market is likely to head, to the extent that the state can facilitate that market advancement in those areas, is the area we're learning about right now. I think the ARB in its policy documents has recognized that we don't believe that electrification of every truck is the goal or is going to happen anytime soon. It's to start accelerating the market where it does make the most sense, potentially in lighter vehicles, where weight isn't the primary issue. Even space and payload, if that's an issue to an extent, we're going to evaluate that and looking at what the strategies may be. and then more broadly, as you may know, it's not necessarily SB 350, but there's a freight strategy and overall coordination between ARB and our other sister agencies, Caltrans in particular, in terms of policies that are much broader than one under our purview, but that is under their purview in terms of what weight limits should be for bigger trucks, smaller trucks, and things of that nature. That's all part of that discussion and is a complex issue because you're talking about road impact and the cost of road and bridge. I know there's bridge limits in California that are a little bit different. So I'm not as familiar with the details there, but that's a much broader issue. It is part of the overall dialogue in the state, but not necessarily part of this. Chris, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the gentleman's question is whether or not the weight penalties from alternative technologies have been assessed and accounted for the infrastructure side, and I can tell you the answer is mostly no. There is a national exemption for two types of technologies. There's a 400-pound additional weight limit for auxiliary power units for idle reduction, as well as 2,000 pounds for natural gas vehicles. But the implications of the weight penalties for something like battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell, which will probably be greater than for natural gas, have not been even discussed on the infrastructure level so far. And so, I mean, we're early in the process, but even something like a refuse vehicle that were to go battery electric, because of the axle distribution, you would have to either reduce payload or the municipalities would have to have some sort of exemption available for those technologies. And that discussion has not occurred.
David, go ahead.
David Rentschler, City of Fairfield again. And so I guess this is the perfect time to bring that type of situation up, as it doesn't sound like it's been thought about too much or addressed in the regulation. So hopefully folks will look at that in the future. Thank you.
So was there another question for Edison? Noel, do you have another?
Just to add to my previous point to clarify the propulsion systems, a permissible technology could be a catenary line on top of a roadway to address some of the geographically specific air reduction requirements. So like this, Eric, you could probably point to this, but the 710 project specifically is reducing the trucking emissions in the port, but would not allow the vehicle to not incur the extra weight of the vehicle batteries.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to add, since I see Kent over here with Proterra, the electric bus anyway, that one of the ones that Proterra makes is lighter than most other diesel and conventional technology vehicles. I'm not saying that that's necessarily going to be the case for trucks, but I think this is an area of innovation where, you know, weight for really large trucks, I'm sure is going to be a big issue, but there's other ways to electrify, including the discussion that we had with our first workshop on electrification of trucks. It's some of the fleets are already operating vehicles that do have batteries, but also a range extender or an internal combustion engine to meet their daily needs and manage their risk. That lowers cost, it lowers weight and everything. So that still is an area of discussion within ARB as to how that fits in. I think it fits squarely within the transportation electrification area, and that might be the best middle ground in the near term for this early deployments strategies. And I think we're going to hear from some of the fleets and what they've actually done in terms of operating zero-emission vehicles and what types of vehicles that they're operating to see where the opportunities may be. So, Chris?
Yeah, just one observation from the Edison presentation is, again, we're in a really early stage right now, but just some of the initial discussions we've had about some of the charging scenarios that you could end up seeing specific to whether or not the fleet would want to own the EVSE infrastructure. You're going to have situations at a facility where the fleet is entirely owned and operated by the facility owner. You're also going to have other situations I can think of just, off the top of the head, refrigerated trailer fleets that the facility owner may have an arm's length business relationship with the people coming in, may not own a single trailer, yet will be responsible for providing infrastructure. And so some sort of administration of, who owes what for the electricity might be desired. So I think, again, very initial, but something that we should be discussing is some of the business models that could emerge as we sort of get a better picture of what type of equipment is going to be electrified initially.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I think for these applications, they need to be written in a way that's broad enough to allow for those different types of business models to operate, and then be able to figure that out when it comes to the implementation. And so I think that there's some long lead times when it comes to deliberation at the PUC for a final approval, and so we do have some time to work out those details, but the applications themselves, we're hoping are broad enough to cover that.
Sorry, there's a question in the back or comment.
Sorry about the delay. Just to echo those comments, I think one of the other types of scenarios that has been not fully addressed by any of the utilities is the fact that in addition to having fleets that service a customer who isn't necessarily the owner of the truck, you also have fleets that are stationed out of a place where they are going to need to charge themselves and are leasing the facility. And for example, when you're talking about a port and you've got an owner-operator versus a lease space versus an owner-operator of a truck, you're going to have a wide variety of configurations, even like just between the port 1 mile off-site versus a municipality servicing the same port. And that would all be in the same sort of area. And so the greater flexibility and the greater advice you can give to technology providers on how to advise their customers, that would be great, because the form in which you get advice from utilities varies so widely, and there is no standardized place to get an answer. Every time a customer comes, it becomes a one-off project, and that slows the rate of deployment at a state level.
Excuse me, can you identify yourself, please? Name and
Irving Negrani, Motive Power Systems.
Thank you.
I also want to kind of echo on both of your comments. In terms of transportation electrification at those facilities with multiple purposes and also multiple fleets to coming in, there are more challenges that we do have to kind of address. And also, for today's agenda, we are also going to spend some time in the afternoon to talk about how we should to flush out some of the issues, but also try to identify if there's any feasible solutions we can kind of come up with for those kind of facilities. Thanks.
Okay, and Erica, I do want to, I have spoken to a transit fleet in your area that is quite interested in the utility owning the infrastructure and operating it, and they would pay whatever the fee is to use it. And that would be a comment that I think we've heard from more than one, especially when you're talking about en-route type charging systems, because at least from the multiple transits we've spoken to, is they don't want to be in the business of being a utility. They want to run their buses and run their service. And so that would be an important area of interest for at least multiple. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on the transit perspective on that, but I suspect even private fleet owners, to the extent that charging could occur remotely, not at their depot, that would be more important. And I'll leave it to the fleet owners later to describe if it's a high priority for on depot.
Len Engel, the Antelope Valley Transit Authority. We're working with Edison at this point in developing our depot charging facility. So they'll own part of it, and we'll pay a rate on that. But in terms of en route charging, we're going to have to split up our infrastructure between Lancaster Choice Energy and Southern California Edison when we're outside the city of Lancaster. So be very interested in discussing further with Eric. We still are in your area, but based on Jana's comments earlier, we may want to secede and annex to PG&E.
So to move the meeting along, since it's already past noon, I'd like to finish the discussion, or at least the presentations from the utilities, and then we can take a break at that time and then reconvene with the subsequent session after the lunch break. So are we, is SMUD going to be the next?
Right here.
Thanks, Bill.
I'll just give you, I'll try and move things along, more or less do a Delta update from where we were at back in April. Since the last meeting of this group, we've actually initiated a full market study of the medium heavy duty market in Sacramento. Given that we're pretty small, we're really trying to dive in on this in kind of more of a much more of a detailed fashion. Doing fleet assessment, classifications, really emphasizing on a couple of different markets, really kind of taking a look at which ones are going to be approachable for electrification, and then really develop some kind of electrification cost and energy assessment. So I kind of equate this to more of a micro scale analysis versus what I've seen most of the studies have been more at a state level. Also, in support of what has gone on, SMUD is jumping in a little bit larger fashion with Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District and Elk Grove, Twin Rivers, and Sac City Unified School Districts with regards to the ARB grant they've got for school buses. Primarily, we're going to kind of up our interest in that from just providing subject matter expert to support to also supporting the charging infrastructure. And our key factor there, and I think the genesis of a lot of the where we're all at, and Jana kind of hinted at this, but this is all very early, and we're jumping in on this mostly to get lessons learned and data gathering. And I like to think of all these early things as really as much data gathering as we can get to help us understand how to support this market and understand what rates it will require, and as much of the data gathering as we can is what we're interested. Subsequent to that, we've also made the decision to jump in a lot more in our own fleet electrification. Recently got recognition from a White House program on that, but we've submitted a local proposal with a lot more electrification as some of the municipal fleets. We'll cross our fingers on that. And then also been doing a lot more look some of these other markets. We have successfully gotten through one truck refrigeration unit project, and that was with a captive fleet TRU owner. And now we're looking at moving kind of with an arm's length type situation that Chris mentioned. Another one I'll bring up, it just kind of shows you the state of the market. We're also very active with the national movement to try to get more common charging connectors, codes and standards development that are still ongoing in this whole world. Some of the stuff, we've even found out when you think about it that is so basic that we've seen that hasn't occurred, but I think it's a good indication is things like interlocks on the charging system so people can't pull off with the cord still attached. And a lot of things that have been worked out well in the car industry over on the light duty side still have yet to be tackled, I think, on some of these applications. So I bring that up because we all still are in the learning and development mode, and we're going to have to do a lot more of that to make this usable and, make it more common, low cost, and avoid a lot of those types of problems. So that's my comments for today.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Do we? Oh, okay. Okay, then we can move on to the LEDWP.
Well, it is afternoon.
Good afternoon. Bassam Abu Shakra, LA Department of Water and Power. I'm the new Electric Transportation Program Manager. Previously, I handled all the power system contracts and specs, so it's something new, but we're very supportive of this new technology. So I'll be talking about mainly three things. First, what's going on at LADWP. Currently, we have a total of 4 what we call diesel electric. We have 1 bucket truck and 3 what we call them the digger derricks or the auger booms. We have them over probably about a year. So our fleet engineering has been working to develop new contracts. So we do have a new contract in place for a total of 39 plug-in hybrid. So they'll be delivered next year. And also we're finalizing some contracts for a total of 22 of, these are for bucket trucks. Some are be used by our, linemen, electrical distribution, and some for tree trimming. So, CNG has been in for a while at DWP. So we have a total of 466, but we do have a total of 406 electric and hybrid. And we expect that number to go over 500 by next year. Now, LADWP is working with multiple city agency and transit agency. We're working with the Rec and Park, and they're looking at having 6 to 8 electric buses at the Griffith Park. So we're looking what they need for their infrastructure. We already have a site visit. We have a dedicated, a new business engineer that takes care of all the charging infrastructure. And also the DOT, the LA DOT, they have, I can't keep track exactly, but they do have 4 of these electric buses dash in downtown area. We built already, completed the infrastructure, so they're either delivered or they'll be delivered very soon, and they have another order for 4 more. LA Zoo, that's a very interesting project because they're looking at solar installation, energy storage, and electric buses. So there is some meetings going on. I can't give you the time frame, but it's going on. And also LA Sanitation, they working on a project for 2 electric trucks. Now the LA Metro, LAMTA passed a motion on October 27 to have only electric buses at the Orange Line, and that consists of 43 electric buses. So we're going to be meeting with them to see what their infrastructure needs are. For sure, they're not interested in building it or maintaining it. Currently, all their CNG is maintained by third party, and they want to continue that in the future. And also, they're looking at the feasibility for the Silver Line, which is 31 electric buses. And then the LA City Council or the Energy and Environment Committee, they had a motion that passed on November 2nd, also supporting this Orange Line electric buses, and it's going to go to full council sometime in November. Now, LADWP have a very aggressive, what I call an EV rebate program. It's very structured for the residential and commercial. This is our 3rd rebate program, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on this. But the new one, it started March 1st to June 30, 2018. Now, in terms of the heavy duty, there's going to be incentives that is not yet well defined, but mainly for their infrastructure. And also there's going to be a new rate. That's what we're looking at, a new rate. So, so this is mainly what I have. So DWP is very supportive of this program, and we see it that's going to grow into the future. So any comments or questions? So I guess before I let people, oh, you have a comment back here? Okay.
Do you know if the incentives that you're planning on putting out are going to be stackable with other state incentives, or if they'll be standalones?
For the heavy duty, like I said, I talked to the director this morning. It's not yet defined, but it's mainly incentives towards their infrastructure, Is it going to be helping them to put transformer, putting the conduit, how to bring it to the pedestal? So it's not yet defined, but it will be very soon. And to be clear, even in the discussion of what that incentive might look like, is it primarily for a particular subset of your customers, like public agencies, or would it be broader to private companies and others potentially? It's mainly for public and commercial. Okay. Yes. Okay. So before we do take a break, somebody pointed out I probably should ask is from the fleet perspective. I know we have some transit fleets here. Do I raise your hands as who's representing a transit fleet, just so that kind of get a sense of who's in the audience? Okay. From trucking fleets and more broadly, anybody represented? Well, city and California Trucking Association. So any school districts represented at all? No. Anybody else that I didn't mention that would be a fleet owner, off-road or other construction categories, off-road equipment, and other things like that. Okay, good. So we don't have a lot of people in the room that represent the different categories, but we have almost all represented other than school districts, but at least we have a representation of some that are working there. So I'll go ahead and, oh wait, let me, there was a comment that came in on via the email. This is for Eric. It's basically, they do want to talk to you. So I'm going to give you this email here, but it does point out that there is some current efforts underway, apparently with Edison, BYD, and Mayer Logistics. There's a right-of-way approval in Compton and infrastructure improvement for 10 drayage truck charging stations. Are you aware? Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I'm sorry that slipped my mind when talking about current strategies, but that's a project for 10 drayage trucks with BYD at BNSF.
Okay. Very good, and I'll hand this to you.
Great, thank you.
So let's see, when do we? Actually, that'll work out well. And so we can return at 1:30, and we'll continue on item 3 at that point. Okay. Thank you all.